When music and the law collide, things can get pretty interesting.
Absolutely. And in this case, it's Drake versus Universal Music Group, or UMG, as we'll probably be saying a lot. And it all stems from Kendrick Lamar's diss track, Not Like Us.
And just to be clear right from the start, we're not talking about a simple disagreement between artists here. This is a full-on legal battle. Drake's alleging defamation, and he's pointing the finger directly at UMG for releasing and promoting what he says are straight-up lies.
And that's what makes this so fascinating from a legal standpoint. You know, typically when there's beef in the music world, it stays within those circles. But Drake's going after the label itself, the corporate machine behind the music, and that could have some pretty big implications.
For sure. So to break this down, Drake's basically accusing UMG of a few key things. First off, he says they intentionally promoted a song that labels him a PDF. Which, for those not in the know, is a pretty serious accusation within this whole feud. And Drake saying UMG knew it wasn't true, but they pushed the song out anyway.
Right. And it's not just about that one label. There's the whole issue of the lyrics themselves, specifically the lines about wop wop and F them up. Drake's arguing that those lyrics actually incited violence, directly contributing to that attack on his home back in May.
Yeah, that's a huge jump, taking lyrical content and tying it to real-world events and real harm. It makes you think about where the line is. How much responsibility do labels have for what their artists put out there?
It's a massive question, especially in a genre like hip-hop, where pushing boundaries and being provocative is kind of part of the DNA. I mean, how do you separate artistic expression from potential consequences down the line?
Exactly. And for Drake, the consequences have been very real, according to him. He's claiming that all this, the accusations, the alleged incitement of violence, it's all put his safety, his finances, even his whole reputation at risk.
And that's the core of any defamation case, right?
Yeah.
Proving that harm, proving that the words led to tangible negative consequences. So Drake's lawyers have their work cut out for them. They need to show that the release and promotion of Not Like Us directly caused those damages.
Then you add in the whole digital layer to this, which gets even more complex. Drake initially went after UMG, claiming they were using bots on Spotify to artificially pump up the song's numbers, and he even alleged this thing called poliola, which is supposedly some shady way to manipulate radio airplay.
Yeah, those accusations definitely tapped into a lot of anxieties in the music industry today. I mean, everyone's worried about streaming numbers being gamed, and there's always been suspicion about the power that radio still holds.
Oh yeah, and then there was that wild claim about asking Siri to play Drake's song, Certified Lover Boy, on Apple Music, and it supposedly redirecting you to Not Like Us. It was like every element of music promotion was being scrutinized.
Absolutely. But of course, UMG isn't just sitting back and taking this. They've got a pretty strong defense strategy coming together.
Definitely. So one of their main arguments is that Drake was himself heavily involved in this whole rap battle, throwing out similar accusations in his own diss track, Family Matters.
Yeah, it's the classic two can play at that game defense. UMG is saying Drake can't cry foul when he's been using the same tactics himself.
Right. And they're also playing the we're just doing our job card, saying they're a record label. They release and promote music. That's what they do. It's standard practice.
Which is true to a certain extent. I mean, that's the fundamental function of a label, to get their artist music out there. But it brings up the question of where the line is. When does a label cross over from simply doing its job to actively promoting harmful content?
And UMG is also arguing that the lyrics in Not Like Us need to be understood within the context of a rap battle. They're saying it's clearly hyperbole exaggeration for effect, and no reasonable person would take those accusations as literal fact.
The reasonable person standard is key in defamation law. And UMG's point is that the very nature of diss tracks signals to listeners that it's not about factual accuracy, it's about creative expression within this specific genre.
Makes sense. And then UMG took things a step further, bringing up pre-existing rumors and even a video involving Drake and a minor.
Now that's a tactic that definitely raised eyebrows.
Yeah.
They're essentially saying that any damage to Drake's reputation might not be solely because Not Like Us. They're trying to shift some of the blame and create doubt about where the negativity actually stems from.
So as the legal battle kicked off, Drake's team wasted no time. They hit UMG with a pretty wide-ranging demand for documents, including some big asks like Kendrick Lamar's entire recording contract and all the details about how they marketed Not Like Us.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty aggressive discovery request. Drake's lawyers are clearly digging deep. They're looking for anything that might back up their claims of malicious intent or negligence on UMG's part. I mean, getting a hold of Kendrick's contract could reveal a lot about UMG's obligations, their motives, you name it.
Right. And of course, UMG countered with their own legal maneuvers. They filed a motion to dismiss the whole case, basically saying Drake's claims have no merit. And they also filed a motion to stay discovery, which is a fancy way of asking the court to hit pause on the whole information gathering process until a judge rules on whether the case should even continue.
That's a pretty standard move for defendants. It's a way to avoid the hassle and the cost of handing over tons of documents if they think the case is going to get thrown out anyway.
So this brings us to the latest developments. There was a pre-trial conference recently that focused on UMG's request to pause discovery, and that's where things got really interesting. The first big news was that Drake's team actually withdrew their initial complaint. They're not dropping the whole lawsuit, but they're basically saying they're going to file an updated version, which could mean some changes to their original allegations.
Interesting. So why would they do that? It could be a strategic move. Maybe UMG's arguments in their motion to dismiss poked some holes in Drake's initial claims. So now Drake's team is going back and refining their approach, tightening up their arguments.
Now, UMG's reasons for wanting to hit pause on discovery were pretty clear-cut. They basically said, look, Drake withdrawing his complaint makes it seem like his case isn't that strong. They also pointed to the timeline, saying the song came out way back in May 2024, but Drake didn't file this lawsuit until January 2025, which is spinning as a sign that he wasn't really that worried about the damage.
Yeah, they're trying to create this narrative of a weak case being dragged out unnecessarily. And then there's the whole issue of the scope of Drake's discovery request. UMG was especially unhappy about him asking for Kendrick's contract and how much he's making at Interscope. They're calling it a fishing expedition, basically.
But Drake's lawyer wasn't having it. He fired back, saying UMG hasn't actually proven that the complaint is baseless. He pointed out that UMG's motion to dismiss is directly challenging the facts that Drake laid out in his complaint, which means there's a fundamental disagreement about what actually happened and what UMG's intentions were.
Right, so Drake's team is saying, look, you can't just claim our case is weak without letting us actually investigate and gather evidence to back up our side of the story. Discovery is crucial for resolving these factual disputes.
And here's where things took a turn. Drake's team announced they were dropping the whole botting accusation, the claim that UMG used streaming farms to boost Not Like Us on Spotify. This came after reports said that Spotify itself hadn't found any evidence of botting on Kendrick's tracks and that the source for the claim wasn't reliable.
Okay, so that's a pretty significant concession. It's like they realized that particular accusation was weak, and they're trying to streamline their case, focus on the stronger arguments.
Yeah, Drake's team admitted they'd gotten a Rule 11 letter from UMG about the whole botting thing. For those who don't know, a Rule 11 letter is basically a formal warning from one legal team to another saying, hey, we think this part of your case is bogus, and if you keep pushing it, you might face penalties from the court.
Right, so it's a way of saying, you better be sure you've got solid evidence to back this up, but Drake's lawyer downplayed it, saying it was just a small part of their overall complaint.
So to address UMG's arguments head-on, Drake's team is going to file an updated complaint by April 16th. This new version will reportedly deal with UMG's references to Drake's own diss track Family Matters, and it'll also include Kendrick's Super Bowl halftime performance where he performed Not Like Us. They're arguing that UMG kept promoting the song even after they knew it was allegedly causing harm.
So it seems like they're preemptively addressing some of the counterpoints that UMG brought up. And they're trying to use the Super Bowl performance to show that the song continued to have a huge reach even after the initial release, which could strengthen their claims of ongoing damage.
Drake's lawyer also defended their extensive discovery request, saying it's pretty standard when you're going up against a massive corporation. He even brought up an NFL case that had something like 40 defendants, just to show that their request, which is focused on one defendant, UMG, and basically 1 year of documents, isn't that out of line?
It's all about context, right? They're trying to normalize their approach and make it seem reasonable, given the scale and complexity of this kind of litigation.
Now, a big topic that came up was the whole idea of actual malice in defamation cases. For Drake to win his case, he basically has to prove that UMG knew the accusations in Not Like Us were false, or they acted with reckless disregard for the truth, which basically means they ignored obvious signs that the accusations were probably bogus. And remember, Drake's a public figure, so the bar is set way higher for him than it would be for a private citizen.
Yeah, proving actual malice is a big hurdle in these cases, especially for someone like Drake. It's not enough to just show that the statements were false. He has to show that UMG knew they were false or strongly suspected it, but they didn't care. They pushed ahead anyway.
And Drake's team seems confident that they can meet that standard. They think they've got the evidence to show that UMG was aware of the potential falsity, but they chose to release and promote the song regardless.
Well, we'll see how that plays out in court, because that's a pretty bold claim.
Yeah.
But it definitely suggests they think they've got some strong evidence.
We also learned that Drake's team has been busy issuing subpoenas to third parties. They've already hit 3, and they're working on a 4th. While they haven't officially said who these third parties are, it seems pretty likely that Spotify and iHeartMedia are involved, given the whole botting and radio play accusations that were made earlier.
Makes sense. They're casting a wide net, trying to gather evidence from anyone who might have information that's relevant to their case. Streaming data, radio promotion records, things like that.
Okay, so let's map out the timeline for what's coming next. Drake's updated complaint is due by April 16th. Then we've got the hearing on UMG's motion to dismiss, which is scheduled for June 30th. As for the actual discovery process, they were initially thinking 6 months, but the judge hinted that might be a bit too ambitious.
Yeah, it's a lot to cram into 6 months. But here's the big takeaway. The judge actually denied UMG's motion to stay discovery. What does that tell us?
Well, it means that Drake's team is cleared to start gathering information from UMG right now. They could potentially get access to Kendrick Lamar's contract, and they might even start deposing UMG employees.
Wow, that's a pretty big win for Drake's side. It suggests that the judge isn't convinced that Drake's case is totally baseless and that further investigation is needed.
Absolutely. And this whole situation raises some interesting questions about Drake's motives. I mean, what's he really hoping to achieve here? Is it all about money? Is he seeking financial compensation for the damage to his reputation?
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. I mean, it's pretty common in defamation suits for the plaintiff to seek financial damages. But it could also be about more than just money. Maybe he wants, not like us, taken down from streaming services to prevent any further harm.
Right, or could this be about leverage? Maybe he's using this lawsuit to renegotiate his contract with UMG or even get out of it altogether, especially considering that his OVO label recently moved over to Sony.
All of those are definitely possibilities. It's hard to say for sure what Drake's ultimate goal is, but given the recent developments with OVO and Sony, the contractual angle is definitely something to keep an eye on.
And then there's the bigger picture, the potential impact on the music industry as a whole. If Drake wins this case, could it set a precedent that makes labels think twice before releasing controversial diss tracks? Could it stifle artistic freedom or lead to stricter vetting processes, which could slow down the whole back and forth nature of these feuds?
It's a valid concern. If labels start feeling like they're taking on huge legal risks every time they release a diss track, it can definitely have a chilling effect on artistic expression. But on the other hand, it might force everyone to be more responsible about the content they're putting out there.
Oh, and speaking of the music industry, we can't forget Kanye West's recent comments about this whole situation. He said something like, "I hate Drake and I'm Team Drake at the same time," and even hinted at wanting to collaborate with him.
Yeah.
It just shows how complicated these relationships can be in the rap world.
Yeah, Kanye is always good for a soundbite.
Yeah.
But his comments, whether you take them seriously or not, do highlight the fact that there's often a lot more going on behind the scenes as what we see on the surface.
Okay, so to sum things up, the big development is that Drake's legal team can now go ahead with discovery against UMG. The judge shut down UMG's attempt to stop that process, so Drake's lawyers can start digging into UMG's internal documents and potentially question their employees under oath.
And we can't overlook the fact that Drake's team dropped the botting accusation, and they're planning to tweak their complaint. It shows that their strategy is fluid. They're adapting as they go.
For sure. And for our listeners out there, we want you to really think about the broader implications of this case. What does it say about artistic expression in the world of diss tracks, where the lines are often blurred between creativity and personal attacks? How could this legal battle change the relationship between artists and the powerful labels that back them?
Yeah, this case could potentially set some major precedents and force the music industry to grapple with some really tough questions about responsibility, liability, and the limits of artistic freedom.
And as this whole saga continues to unfold, we're reminded that fame and fortune often come with a price. The spotlight can be harsh, especially when personal conflicts spill out into the public arena. And for corporations like UMG, there's the constant balancing act of supporting their artists while also navigating the potential legal and ethical minefields that come with their creative output.
It's a fascinating story with a lot of moving parts, and we'll be keeping a close eye on it as it develops.
Absolutely. So until next time, keep those ears open and stay tuned.
And remember, think critically about the music you consume and the forces at play behind it.